Hi, welcome to ConflictStory, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
Gravel popped under my boots like popcorn in a hot pan. The desert wind slapped dust in my face, and there it was, nailed right to my father's cedar gate, a fresh white placard screaming, "Sold. Foreclosure auction." A tow truck idled beside the archway, chains clinking, ready to rip the old ranch sign off like a loose tooth. A woman in an orange community compliance vest, blonde, heavy-set, chin high like she was measuring my worth, stood with her hands on her hips, phone camera already pointed at me. "You're trespassing," she said, sweet as vinegar. "I already called 911. You ever open a door to your past and find someone else living inside your memories? That's what it felt like. "I'm Ethan Walker," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I inherited this ranch. I'm not part of any—" "Homeowner Association annexed you last winter," she snapped. "Back dues, special assessment for the fire road, auction processed. This property is under new management." Her name tag winked in the sun. Karen Doyle. The tow operator, bored and chewing gum, tightened the hook around my father's sign beam, the sign he carved the year I went off to academy. Walker Ranch. The paint had faded, but the groove of each letter held dust and time, and the last thing my father touched before his hands started shaking. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights washing the dirt in anxious blue. I held up my envelope, probate papers, title, the deputy's card from when I first called about break-ins last month. Karen thrust a folder at the deputy before I could breathe. "Officer, we have audio records of Mr. Walker acknowledging his annexation. Here." She tapped her phone. "And he was warned." The deputy looked 25 and tired. He scanned my papers, then hers, then me. "Sir, I need you to step back from the gate. Let's keep things calm." "Calm?" I laughed, and it sounded like a cough. "They sold my place before I could move in." Karen's smile sharpened. "You can appeal after you vacate. You won't believe what happened next, because I didn't either." The tow truck yanked. Wood screamed. My father's arch gave way, the sign skidding in the dirt like a fallen headstone. People stopped on the road. Phones came up. The deputy lifted a hand like he could stop the sky from falling, but not this. I stepped back, hands open, heat pounding at my temples. Have you ever stood in public and felt your throat close with nothing to say that anyone would hear? Let me back up. My old man and I never quite made peace. I ran toward fire because everything else felt too slow. He stayed on this land and wrote letters in block print like orders. "Fix the south fence. Ride out after rain. Call me back sometime, son." When his heart went sideways last spring, I arrived late enough to miss the last thing he ever meant to tell me. That kind of lateness becomes a habit you hate yourself for. I thought the ranch would give me a way back. Shovel in dirt, hammer on nails, a place to lay down the weight. Instead, I got Karen. Here's what happened next. I followed the tow truck to the end of the road and watched them toss my father's sign into the bed like scrap. Karen snapped photos. "Documentation," she chirped. "Officer, he's being non-compliant." "I have title," I said again, showing the deputy the stamped probate. "No mention of any annexation. The ranch predates your subdivisions." Karen waved a stapled packet like a flag. "Master covenants. Annexation by board vote. We posted notice at the community board, sent letters." He ignored. "It's sent where?" I asked. She smirked. "On file." I felt something small break inside my chest. Not rage, something more brittle, like the splinter you get under your nail that you can't see but can't forget. "Sir," the deputy said, gentler, "I'm going to ask you to leave for today. If you want a contest, there's a process." I looked at my father's house, vines crawling over the porch post, where he used to hang a lantern when I stayed out too late. The wind pushed heat through the mesquite. A quail darted under the steps, like it knew enough to hide. "Process," I repeated. "Sure." I drove to the title office with the AC fighting the sun and my stomach hollow. The receptionist had the careful smile of someone who's told too many people their memories don't matter. I sat across from a man with a tie the color of bruised fruit. He adjusted his glasses and clicked through records. "Foreclosure auction happened via a contractor," he said. "Community servicers. They said there were unpaid assessments for fire road upgrades. Certified notices were delivered. looks like to a P.O. box in town. I don't have a P.O. box in town. He shrugged like that wasn't his business. I leaned in. Who signed off? He scrolled. Stopped. Odd. Payment for the auction advertisement was processed on a personal card belonging to Doyle. Karen Doyle. But here's what she didn't know. The desert holds secrets longer than people do, and paper isn't the only trail a thief leaves. Have you ever felt the floor tilt when the rules stop, meaning what you thought they did? On my way out, a beat-up pickup rolled past my truck. A guy climbed down. Dark hair, grease under his nails, tattoos threaded down his forearms like vines. He spit, missing my boot by an inch. You the inheritance guy? He asked without looking at me. Depends who's asking. Cole, he said. I fix what people break when they know no one will call them on it. He jerked his chin toward the road. Leave it. You'll lose. They almost got my shop last year. Fire code compliance fee. For a building that doesn't have power. So why didn't they? He shrugged. I paid. That's the game. He started to walk, then stopped, glanced back. Or you make a different game. You offering help? I'm offering a warning, he said, and faded into the heat shimmer like a mirage that remembered your name. At the ranch, an orange sticker clung to my truck door. Community violation. Unauthorized parking on a county road. Karen stood 30 yards away, chin high, filming. You like attention that much? I asked. Documentation, she said again, sugar on steel. You will be cited if you step past that line. And I stayed where I was, dust itching my throat. Who's the new buyer? Investor, she said, eyes sliding sideways. Private. I could have screamed. Instead, I drove to the post office because grief makes you do small, smart things when big, smart things feel impossible. The clerk was a woman with sun-lashed eyes and a jaw like a ranch gate. Nancy Lee, her badge said. You delivered to Walker Ranch? I asked. Did, she said, before the cluster. What cluster? She snorted. They put a community box at the new end of Copper Spur, told us to redirect. We never do that without owner authorization, but someone waved a letter, looked official. She tilted her head. You Ethan? Yeah. Your dad used to bring me peaches, she said softly. He wouldn't have moved delivery without telling me. We've been doing this dance 20 years. What address did the notices go to? She tapped a screen, frowned. A box rented for 1 month, then closed, paid cash. The person on record, Doyle, Karen. She met my eyes. You didn't hear that from me. What would you do if the person who calls the rules also writes the loopholes? I drove back as the sun started to slide. The ranch looked like a stage after the show, empty, littered with tape and footprints and things left behind. I walked the fence line because that's what men like me do when we can't fix a thing yet. We circle it, touch every post, hope a solution rises like a jackrabbit from the brush. At the northwest corner, I knelt. A splintered boot heel stuck out from under a warped plank. I knew the leather before I touched it, my father's old left boot, the one he wore for 20 summers until the sole flapped and he claimed it was luck. I slid it free. Dust spilled like ash. I sat with it in my lap, the sun bleeding red through the mesquite. Funny thing is, a man can be strong enough to carry other people's weight and still drop his own. I felt my chest cave in. I pressed my palm to the porch step, wood hot and rough, and said it out loud because it was too big to swallow. I'm late again, Dad. You ever sit so still the world moves around you and forgets you were part of it? Headlights rumbled down the dirt. A truck door creaked. A bottle cap clinked on the porch. Cole set 2 beers on the stair and didn't look at me while he opened his. You either let them roll you, he said, or you do something that makes them hurt. I'm not breaking the law, I said. He took a swig. Didn't say break it, said make it work for you. He tapped the boot in my hand. Your old man keep any files? Plans? Guy like him, he'd have rolled maps somewhere. I thought of the old feed shed and the pipe rack we'd used as kids to play submarine. My father had stashed fence staples, oil tins, and 1,000 stubborn habits there. Maybe. Cole stood. Sun's burning out. If you're going to find a spine, do it before she sells your ribs. I laughed, short, raw. You always talk like that? Only when I'm right, he said, and left the second beer on the stair. Here's what happened next. I found the roll of survey maps in a dented steel tube behind a stack of rusted plow blades. The paper crackled like brittle leaves. I unrolled coordinates drawn in my father's steady hand and a county stamp from 1978. In the corner, a note. Accepted tract. Private, not subject to common covenants. A strip of land like a crooked finger cut across the map. Thin, ugly, crucial. It ran along the irrigation ditch that fed the green lawns in that new cul-de-sac. Water they bragged was sustainable. But here's what Karen didn't know. That ditch was mine. I called Joe Harlan, the cable guy who once climbed my father's windmill just to say he did. Joe picked up on the second ring, voice smoky as a diner's grill. Ethan, heard the noise. Sorry about your mess. You run fiber through Copper Spur? Don't get me started, he said. They routed a trunk through your easement without paperwork. I told them. They pretended not to hear. You still mad? You give me a reason, he said. I'll remember how mad. I read him the coordinates. Silence. Then a low whistle. If that map checks out, they hung half their pretty toys on your nail. What if I pulled the nail? He chuckled. You don't have to pull anything. You file a private easement notice, and you close a valve you own. People do the rest for you. Meet me at dawn, I said. Bring coffee black as taxes. Have you ever realized your enemy built their throne on your porch and forgot to ask permission? Before first light, I stood at the ditch headgate with a wrench and that map in a plastic sleeve tucked into my shirt. The air smelled like cold mud and creosote. The gate handle was scarred where my father's hand had worn it smooth. I turned the wheel a quarter, then another. Water slowed to a sulky trickle. I posted a laminated sign on a T-post, private easement access. License revoked pending owner consent. Joe arrived with a dented thermos and a grin. Nice sign, he said. Ugly truth, I said. He climbed a pole on my fence line with the ease of a man who never stopped climbing anything. They put a splitter box right over your line, he called down. No permit, no agreement. I can't kill service, but I can remove what's on your property and leave them to fix their mess. Do it. By noon, the cul-de-sac lawn started to blush brown. Sprinklers coughed air. Doorbells went dead. Cameras blinked and froze. Karen's SUV tore down the road, dust feathering behind. She braked so hard gravel spit at my boots. What did you do? She said, voice high and thin. I exercised my right, I said. I revoked a license no one asked for. This is unacceptable, she hissed. You endangered the community. You endangered it when you built on what you don't own. She stepped close enough for me to smell her perfume, sharp lilies over sweat. You think this scares me? No, I said. I think it embarrasses you. Her phone rang. She turned away, barked into it. We have a situation. No, it's vandalism. No, the investor is coming at 2. Just stall. She caught herself, looked back at me, and tried to smooth her face into steel. But fear crept through anyway. Fear of losing control. It looks the same on everyone. What would you do if your only leverage was the one thing they didn't think to hold? At 150, a black SUV rolled slow like a sermon. A man in a tailored jacket stepped out, checked his watch, and frowned at the dead keypad on the metal HOA gate that blocked the gravel drive to my yard. He pressed. Nothing. He pressed again and looked around for the person who was supposed to make things open for him. Trevor Miles, he said, extending a hand to me without knowing if I'd take it. I was told access would be available. You were told a lot of things, I said. Karen arrived half running, hair out of place, lipstick showing the strain. Minor technical difficulty, she panted. Here's what happens next, I said, loud enough for the workers and the man in the suit and the deputy who'd wandered up to hear. I'm going to mark my boundaries. I'm going to show the piece of land that's never been part of your rules. And then, well, you'll understand. Don't you dare, Karen snapped. This is a private showing. You made it very public, I said, nodding at her phone, her tow truck, her signs. Cole appeared then, quiet as rain. He leaned on my fence, arms crossed, saying nothing, watching everything. Joe wiped his hands on his jeans and came to stand beside me, a tired soldier who picked a side because someone finally asked him to. We set the old metal stakes one by one, following my father's coordinates. The sound of the mallet hitting dirt was like a heartbeat I could finally hear. I ran Mason's line from stake to stake, a bright yellow thread cutting the world into yours and mine. When it crossed the irrigation box and the splitter's pole and the oh-so-pretty gate that led to my porch, Trevor's face clouded. "Karen," he said, tone flat, "what am I looking at?" "A mistake," she said too fast. "A misprint on an old map. It's irrelevant." I held up the county stamp. "Irrelevant like a birth certificate," I said. "Accepted tract, not subject to any common covenant. This water, this pole, my land." Silence stretched, a hawk circled high, shredding the sky into long, thin ribbons. The cul-de-sac buzzed with voices and dead door chimes that would not ring. "Fix it," Trevor said to Karen, eyes never leaving the map. "Now." "That's not how—" she started. "It is today," he said. He turned to me. "Mr. Walker, we'll postpone our interest until this is resolved." "You'll cancel," I said. "You'll call it what it is, and you'll stop letting her sell what she doesn't own." He glanced at Karen, then back at me. "We're done for now." Karen's eyes flicked between us, shock, then anger, then something like a crack in the mask. "You set this up," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did, when you put your gate on my ground and called it law. Have you ever watched the person who pushed you finally stumble over the lie they believed was concrete?" The deputy cleared his throat. "Folks, let's keep it neighborly." "Neighborly began when she brought a tow truck to my father's name," I said. "Now it's just honest." Karen spun on her heel and strode toward her SUV, phone to her ear, voice coiled tight. Trevor followed, face like a storm cloud that decided to rain elsewhere. Joe grinned without showing teeth. Cole reached up and plucked the sold placard from the twisted arch beam resting by my fence. He ran his thumb along the edge, then held it out to me. "Trash or trophy?" he asked. "I'll let you know," I said. And then the wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet earth, even though the sky was clear. I looked at my father's boot on the porch step, toe pointing toward the door like it always had. A simple thing, heavy with everything I'd failed to do in time. Here's the catch. Winning a moment isn't the same as winning a war. Karen wasn't finished, and neither was I. I still had to decide what to do with that thin strip of power that suddenly answered to my name. Have you ever stood on a line you drew and wondered if you were ready to live with it? If you were in my boots right there, what would you do next? Drop a comment and tell me, because what I did, it changed the ground for everyone. The night pressed on the ranch like a heavy blanket. Crickets stitched the dark with their tiny needles. I sat on the porch with my father's old boot by my heel and the map tube across my knees, listening to the water I'd throttled to a whisper. Funny how quiet can be louder than a fight. Here's what happened next. Headlights rolled slow down Copper Spur, not a cruiser. Karen's SUV, followed by two sedans with hazard lights blinking like nervous eyes. She stepped out in a fresh blazer, hair pinned tight, face powdered into control. Two board members trailed her. Thin, tidy people with clipboards and the air of folks who complain about other people's grass while theirs dies in the shade. "Mr. Walker," Karen said, voice smooth. "We're here to resolve the disruption you created." "Good evening to you too," I said. She held out a paper. "Cease and desist. You are interfering with community utilities and emergency access. If you do not restore flow immediately, you will be liable for damages." I read the page in the porch light. It was heavy on threats, light on facts. "This address," I said, tapping the letterhead. "It's mine." Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" I turned the map so her friends could see the yellow line, cutting through everything they thought they controlled. "This strip isn't yours. You built your gate on it. You wired your cameras on it. You ran your water across it. You borrowed my nail and hung your hat." One board member cleared his throat. "Let's not escalate. We can negotiate—" "Funny word," I said, "for something you only say after you lose leverage." Karen's smile tightened. "I will call 911 again." "You already did. They told me to keep it neighborly." Her eyes flashed. "I will file for an emergency injunction." "Do it," I said, "and I'll file one that says you trespassed first. But you know what? That's not what I want." She tilted her head. "What do you want, Mr. Walker?" I looked at the ditch, at the dead keypad by her pretty gate, at the cul-de-sac where sprinklers gasped like fish. "I want control, not revenge." Let me back up. After the investors left and the deputy drifted off, Joe and I sat on my tailgate and split a sandwich like men on a shift. He told me how the association had stiffed him for emergency repairs, how they routed power through private easements and called it community necessity when someone objected. They count on folks not reading the old stuff, he said, on nobody having the stamina to drag the past into the present. Cole reappeared with a handful of rusty stakes and a roll of flagging tape. You'll need more, he said. Tomorrow, they'll pretend they never saw the line. Why are you really helping me? I asked. He shrugged. Because once, I didn't help myself. They hung a notice on my mother's place when she was in hospice. Said she had to trim her bushes to regulation height or pay a fine. I paid it. Then I spent the last week of her life mad at the wrong people. I don't want to do that twice. You ever hear a stranger tell you a piece of your own story and realize you're not alone? Back to the porch. Karen waited, the board held their breath, and the night watched us like an audience that didn't know the ending yet. Here's what I told her. Tomorrow at noon, bring your investor. Bring whoever you use for maps. Bring your locksmith. We'll do this in daylight. I'll show you what you've been stepping on, and then we'll set terms. Terms? She scoffed. License agreements, I said. Written, paid. Revocable at will if you cross me. My house remains outside your covenants in perpetuity. Your gate stays where it is, but it acknowledges my land. Your water and your fiber only cross with my blessing, which I can withdraw if you try to sell my ribs again. You want a community? Act like neighbors. You want to fight? I can be patient. She hesitated, just a hairline crack in the glass. The board members shifted, eyes ping-ponging. People who live on committees aren't built for standoffs at midnight with men who hold wrenches and old maps. We will not be extorted, she said finally. You extorted me the second you sold memories that weren't yours, I said. Now I'm offering you stability. You can call it whatever makes you sleep. She stepped closer. I could see the powder settling into the fine lines by her eyes. Inside the SUV, her phone lit up with messages, a frantic glow in the dark. You don't get to dictate the rules. I'm not dictating, I said. I'm drawing a line. Have you ever found out your worth wasn't what they told you it was, and then had to prove it out loud? They left with threat words floating behind them, like exhaust. I slept light, dreamt of water moving through narrow places and boots that fit a younger man's feet. At sunrise, I poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and waited on the porch until the world warmed back to its usual color. Noon hit like a starting gun. The cul-de-sac churned with trucks, measuring wheels, and a locksmith who swore under his breath at the dead keypad. Karen arrived with a surveyor in a lime vest, a man whose hat tried too hard to say competent. Trevor came in the same suit, jaw set. A few neighbors loitered at the edges, curiosity riding their faces. Careful now, this isn't a show, except it was, and we all knew it. Let's make this quick, Trevor said. I have a flight. Quick depends on honest, I said. We walked the line. The surveyor checked my stakes against his equipment. He bantered numbers under his breath, the way men do when math is their armor. I didn't need his language to see the truth in his face when it turned from smug to careful to resigned. The accepted tract exists, he said at last. It's in the county archive. It's old. He glanced at Karen, then quickly away. It was redrawn incorrectly on newer plats. Incorrectly, I repeated. That's polite. Karen's chin rose. We can resolve this with an easement agreement. I held up a finger. Wait, Mr. Walker, Trevor began. Here's what happens next, I said. I'm going to put this in plain words. You keep your gate. You keep your pretty split rail and your cameras off my post. You keep your water, at my permission. In return, my house remains outside your Homeowner Association, forever. No fines, no stickers, no pretend annexations. You will pay me a monthly license fee that is high enough to remind you that what you borrowed was never free. You will sign a stipulation that any sale touch this property requires the owner's wet signature. And if you break any of it, I turn the wheel again without warning and send you back to the desert you paved over. Karen opened her mouth. I raised the county-stamped map like a preacher with a Bible that still meant something. There's more, I said, softer. I want an apology, not to me, to my father's name. You tore it off my gate like it was trash. You say his name back to me with respect, or you don't get my water. Silence. For a heartbeat, the only sound was wind fingering the dry grass. You're unreasonable, she said. I'm done being reasonable with thieves, I said. Pick. Trevor exhaled, long, like he'd been holding his breath for 2 days. Karen, he said, sign it. She stared at him. We don't have to. If we don't, we lose access. If we lose access, we lose value. If we lose value, we lose money. He turned to me. Draw up the documents, we'll review and... There's no we for my house, I said. You review your licenses. My home is not your business. He gave me a steady look. Understood. Have you ever had your stomach unclench all at once and felt the shake afterward, like your bones remembered fear even when your head moved on? We went to my porch table because that's where this story started and that's where it belonged. I wrote the terms in plain language on a yellow legal pad. No lawyerese, no mazes. Joe took photos of the map and the stakes. The surveyor, to his credit, nodded at my lines and even corrected a number the county had rounded wrong in 1992. Karen read, lips tight, pen hovering like a stinger. They say his name, I reminded her, the simple kind of stubborn that older men wear like a second skin. She swallowed. We regret the distress caused to the Walker family by actions taken in error. Her eyes flicked to mine, hard. We apologize to Mr. Walker, Sr., for the removal of his sign. I wanted to spike the pen through the page and call it a day. Instead, I looked at the worn boot by my chair and the porch my father had sanded until it felt like satin, and I breathed. Put it in writing? She did. Trevor signed for the investors group. The board members signed for the association. Joe and the surveyor witnessed. Cole leaned in the doorway and watched like a man who finally got to see a story end where it should. But here's the part nobody tells you. Getting what you wanted costs. It costs the part of you that was built on being angry, and the part that wanted to burn everything so nobody else could have it. When the pen stopped, I walked to the ditch and turned the wheel back half a turn. Water rushed like relief. The dead keypad blinked, sputtered, then hummed as someone on the other side tried a code and got a polite green light. Sprinklers hissed awake in the distance like a town exhaling. Karen stood very still. Then she did something she hadn't done since the day I met her. She looked small. Not pitiable, just human-sized. The power she wore like perfume didn't sit right under the noon sun. It smelled like lilies and anxiety and the end of something. This isn't over, she said, but it fell flat. The words didn't have a home anymore. Not if you keep to your side, I said. Then it's exactly over. Have you ever watched a bully realize the room wasn't built around them after all? Cole stepped out and handed me the so-old placard he had pulled the day before. I've been holding this, he said. Didn't know if you wanted it. I ran my thumb along the edge. I don't need trophies, I said, but I do need a reminder. I flipped the placard over and wrote in black marker, borrowed, not owned. Then I nailed it, not to my arch, but to the inside wall of the feed shed where my father hid his maps. A warning to me as much as to them. Here's what she didn't expect. I didn't take all the ground I could have. I left a narrow shoulder of my strip to their gate so emergency vehicles could swing wide. Not because they deserved it, because my father would have wanted a path for the ones who come when you're on fire. That was my price and my peace. That evening, the sky slid into gold. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and sat on the step. The signed papers lay on the table, edges weighted with a wrench, a little ceremony of my own. Joe drove by and honked once, a simple note that said, "We did it without saying it." The surveyor dropped off a copy of the corrected plat, folded neat as a letter. Trevor emailed an acknowledgement from the airport. The board members slunk back into their cul-de-sac life. Karen? She drove past slow, eyes forward, hands rigid at 10 and 2. At the corner, she paused, glanced toward my porch, and then looked away. That was the first honest movement I ever saw from her. Then came the quiet. Not the dead kind, the alive kind. The kind where you hear coyotes gossip at midnight and wind comb the grass into rows. I took my father's boot and dug a hole by the threshold with my hands. Soil under my nails, sweat mixing with dust, the old man's leather pressing my palm. I buried the boot toe first, pointing inside. Not a shrine, I told him, voice steady. A promise. You ever set something down and realize you were carrying it so long you forgot what light felt like? Here's the last thing. The Homeowner Association tried to rattle the cage a few times. A letter about a community standard for porch paint. A polite query about yard maintenance along shared sightlines. I mailed back a copy of the license with one line highlighted. Not subject to any covenant. No threats. No rage. Just the weight of the word no, placed carefully on the scale. Cole started dropping by, not for a fight, but to tune carburetors and talk about nothing. Joe fixed my landline and refused to take a dime. Nancy delivered mail to my box again and tucked a small paper sack of peaches on the step, with a note that said, he would have liked today. And me, I got up with the sun and learned the shape of a day that didn't belong to anyone else. I put new letters on the arch and left the wood raw because weather should have its say. I cut the yellow line strings and replaced them with cornerstones, set deep, not to taunt, but to teach. Have you ever felt the world click into a notch you didn't know you were carving? If you've ever been pushed out of your own life and told to wait for a form, hear me. Sometimes the only form that matters is the one you draw yourself, in the dirt, with your own hand. You don't have to be loud, you just have to be certain. Drop a comment if you've been there, standing in the dust, heart in your throat, wondering if you're late again. I know that feeling. It sat with me a long time. It still visits at dusk. But when the wind comes through the mesquite now, it sounds like a door opening, not closing. And when I step across my threshold, I do it with both feet, boot toe pointing in, as promised.